Welcome one and all, I'm Decoy, back with some more cool and unique camp locations for you. This week it's all about power substations. So for those of you who already know how power substations work, unfortunately I don't have anything too special for you, but for the rest of you who don't know how power substations work, you'll get to learn something pretty interesting. So for the most part, you can camp at every power substation. Now, I have heard people say that they've had trouble camping at some of them, and I can understand that. You will definitely have competition for the substation in Cranberry. It is one of the only power substations that I ever see anybody camping at routinely. Now, as for the things that spawn in substations, I tend to see a lot of the same things. It looks like almost every one of them has a chance of having a camp plan spawning inside there. So worth checking out for the plan. But the real key thing about power substations is the power box on the outside that I showed earlier. Because if you're camping here, you can hook into that, and it will give you 10 free power. But if the Poseidon power plant was repaired, for this one, it would actually give you 100 free power instead of 10. Which is cool. Massive downside is enemies spawn in every power substation. So, Forest is a good one just for the fact that it's always going to be low levels that you're dealing with. All the other power substations, at least on a higher level character, are going to spawn in higher level enemies. So, better chance that they'll be able to destroy some stuff before they get taken down. Now, aside from plans being something I normally see at every one of these, of course, in the little room back there, there's a desk and a cabinet, basically. And I do tend to see a metal box that spawns in at every one of these, and at least a toolbox, a tall upright one. So you do get a little bit of containers in the area, you get plans that spawn in, but as for their actual usefulness, it is really questionable. Now if you like the idea of, hey, having some free power at your camp and not having to use part of your camp budget on a generator, this is definitely a route you can go. Now, the ash heap location, I tend to go back to somewhat often for the rat ants. They tend to spawn here somewhat regularly, so I keep coming back, murder them, and then make some rat ant lager, because it is by far, in my opinion, one of the best beers in the game. Now, I gotta figure out what all I'm gonna talk about, because this is just a bit of copy and paste the whole way through. So I guess what I can tell you is, if you are under the thought process of, oh, you know what, I haven't camped at a power substation, I'm going to give it a try. I have two pieces of advice. One, I personally think that if you're going to pick one and you don't want it to be too big of a hassle, I would definitely go with the forest location. Two, I would almost suggest avoiding Cranberry's location. Not because of what is at the Cranberry location, but because of how many people like to camp there. So you're going to get camp blocked a lot. Now, outside of the Cranberry location, I don't really see anybody camping at any of the power substations. I don't know if it's the enemies that are deterring them, or if it's just the fact that they don't want a big old ugly power plant beside their, I guess not a power plant, but an ugly power substation right at their camp. So, as for the enemies that spawn, you'll tend to see scorched ghouls occasionally, I think. When we finally get to the mire, we'll see gulpers. I know there were some spawned in there. I mean, it's a fair variety of enemies that can spawn at the different substations. Of course, the rat ants were by far the most useful in my opinion. Well, I don't know. Because, I mean, you kill a gulper... Well, no. I was going to say you kill a gulper, it's free atoms. But no, it's very specific and you have to be at Gulper Lagoon. So, sadly, gulpers aren't that useful. It's all about them rat ants. But, I'm going to tell you this much. I recently moved one of my characters to the power substation in the forest. And while I was looking at it, of course, right beside the power substation, there's basically the big old power line things right beside it. And for the life of me, I can't think of what it's called. So I was looking at building there, and my thought process right now is I want the camp to be fairly vertical. So it's going to go between the top of the substation up to a higher level in the big old power line thing. Power pylon? There we go. I think that's the word I'm looking for. So, I don't know what other people would do with that spot, but that's kind of what I'm looking at. Power Ewok village type deal. I know, crazy. But your mire location for the power substation, the only good thing about it is how close you are to the purveyor. But, honestly, I don't know. And I've never seen anybody camp here, so that's huge. But again, I mean, you're going to have higher level enemies here. And this is where I had gulpers. And in a minute, I'll show you a gulper that no longer has a head. Because, yep, it just had to be. Yeah. I mean, he could have lived. All he had to do was leave the area so I could record. And I would have left him alone. He could have just been like, alright, Decoy, I'm out of here. And just walk off. Been completely fine with it. He could have left. Been a good day. So, all the power substations thus far have been rather routine. It's the next power substation, the one in Cranberry, that most people are probably familiar with for a very good reason. Because at this location, it is a set deathclaw spawn. A deathclaw will always spawn here. So normally you'll find where people have their camp back behind the power substation and they farm the deathclaw inside. Now I have had a few times where I fast traveled to someone's camp who was camped here, and I get to their camp, all their doors are locked, and somehow the deathclaw is inside their house, locked in. This spot is kind of cool for having the Teddy Fear drummer thing going on. It's definitely awesome. But I would suggest if you're camping here, maybe don't lock all your doors. Because if there's a deathclaw trapped inside and someone comes to your camp, I mean, I would have been nice enough to kill that deathclaw if I could have got in. But instead, I had to wait for it to break a wall so I could shoot him. Which really didn't take him much time at all. But overall, that wraps up all the power substations. Important takeaway is you can get free power. You just got to make sure you're powering up the right power plant for the substation you're at. So pay attention to the name on the power box. That's going to wrap up this week. It'll be back to normal next week. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please remember to like, sub, and share. Later.